Good afternoon. We're going to talk about Module 2 today. And then in that, we talked about W.E. Du Bois. He was the first one who demonstrated for the mass movement for public education. He reconstructed this state and legislatures were responsible for founding the universal public schooling in the South. He also founded a church. We talked about the 14th Amendment, which is where all citizens born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. The 15th Amendment also was where all citizens born in the United States were given the right no matter what their race was. We talked about radical Reconstruction, which is bringing the South into the submission along with protecting black rights. This was an attempt to create a country where it wasn't possible to have biracial and equal citizenship. Or it was possible, sorry. I can't read my writing some days. We also talked about that the Emancipation Proclamation, and this was brought an end to slavery. New laws targeted blacks and criminalized black life. Alabama enhanced penalties for the misdemeanors, which are often led to felony offenses. If you couldn't prove that you was working during all this, you could just be jailed for just that. And a lot of these states like Georgia and Mississippi and Florida, they had what they called pig laws. And you could be theft of a pig was up to 5 years in prison, and that became a felony offense. A lot of the blacks that were jailed during this time were originally jailed on misdemeanors, but then their charges were upgraded to felonies. We had where southern states decided that it'd be cheaper to hire prisoners so they could use them in exchange for labor. So they would have these companies that would be private owned, and they would hire prisoners to do any kind of work they felt like needed a new road fixed. Oh, we'll just hire prisoners. This ended up being a very large primary industry, and in fact, actually, this is still used today. But during this time, they found out that they could pay the prisoners a third less, a quarter less than what they were paying slaves or anybody else. So, they kind of used it to their advantage. I totally disagree with it and today. You had groups formed like the KKK. That was vigilante groups that would attack and intimidate blacks, and the violence was widespread. They did all kinds of different things. They'd have movements and just really not good stuff that they did to the blacks at that time. Unfortunately, this group is still functioning in different parts of the U.S. today. Again, don't want to agree with them. We talked about the 13th Amendment, which says slavery was abolished. In the case of punishment for a crime, possibility of extending slavery by the name convict leasing, like I talked about earlier, where they were hiring convicts, that was also called convict leasing. Alabama was one of the first, in the first year of their convict leasing, made $14,000, and up to this year, or up to 1980, it was $164,000. And today it's roughly $1.4 million, so it's a very profitable industry. And pretty much all the southern states had some sort of convict leasing. J.T. Milner was a slave owner, brilliant engineer, a supremacist racist, said the black man couldn't be profitable or can be profitable as long as there is a Southern man who knows how to manage them. He was known as the father of Southern industrialization. The people replaced slaves with convicts, acquiring them by the thousands. So yeah, they were still keeping slavery intact, but they wasn't calling it slavery anymore. They would whip them, they would keep them chained up, they'd make them walk 3 miles, stand in water, they'd have to build underground railroads or caves where there'd be poisonous gases come out. They'd be tortured, they'd have mental abuse. And then we talked about that they could be paid as little as $9 a month, and that was all that they were given, which is like 50 to 80% less than the workers, and they'd be worked 6 days a week, 12 to 17, 18 hours a day or more. Florida prisoners extracted gum and resin from the pines and made turpentine. Georgia, they hauled wet clay from the riverbanks, molding it into bricks for buildings. Texas and Louisiana went through the forest and cleared and made room for the railroads. Girls and women were forced to work in lumber yards, mining, and camping. We talked about racial segregation was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1986, ruling that Legacy and Ferguson, whites had no withholding when enforcing the harshest punishment on blacks. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed my little video.